Hey y'all, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research, back with our continuing coverage for Native American Heritage Month. Films we were so graciously given access to by the women who make movies film festival. So up today we are talking about the 2020 US film Sisters Rising, and the link to access the film and learn about it is in the show notes below. And this is a hard sit. This is definitely an empathy sit. As Dr. Kristen just said offline, this is a bearing witness sit. It is the story of 6 women living on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in North Dakota who are all survivors of sexual assault. It tells 6 very different but diverging stories of what surviving looks like to them and how they have or haven't found ways to deal with both the personal assault and trauma and violence inflicted on them and the collective assault and trauma inflicted on Native and Indigenous women. The documentary starts out with the horrible statistics that 4 or 5 Native women experienced violence and 1 in 3 will be raped in their lifetime. So that tells you where the perspective of the filmmakers are coming from. And on the Fort Berthold Reservation, there's 3 affiliated tribes, the Mandan, the Hidatsa, and the Arikara. These women some of them belong to this tribe. Some of them are Anishinaabe, Muskogee Creek, Lakota Sioux. They come from all over Indian country, but are on this reservation currently and going through these experiences. So I think for our money, this was one of the better documentaries we watched for this film festival. Certainly having the benefit of being an hour gives you a lot longer to tell a story and to tell it much more detailed. I thought they did a beautifully empathetic job of showing these women and not saying there is a right way or a wrong way to be a survivor or to deal with that trauma or violence. Neither one of us were surprised by anything we heard, which in turn, it feels really disgusting. But there's a couple points we wanted to bring out that we thought were particular to the experience of sexual violence for Indigenous women. So we'll get into that. But if you know nothing of this, or if you know a lot of this, watch this documentary because these women's stories deserve to be seen and heard on this platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was texting with somebody as I was watching it, and I essentially said, this is the exact same documentary I've seen 400 times and completely different at the same time. So for anybody who's been watching us for a long time, you know that we have a lot of conversations about institutions that protect assaulters and assailants and violent men in particular, most recently about Larry Nassar, but we've also talked about Penn State and Baylor and the Catholic Church. And
this is a story we tell a lot.
We're not huge fans of institutions that protect themselves over people, which is a brand I am very comfortable carrying. And so this is a great example of that. The chief institution that exists and take 2. The chief institution that has designed itself to not protect these women is the United States government. Mm-hmm. Through not even just one act, but a whole lot of things. There's a lot of complicated histories of violating of treaties with sovereign nations. There's a lot of throughout American history, how we did machinations and things. So everyone can be forgiven for not quite remembering details. What none of us can be forgiven for forgetting is that at the end of the day, the Native tribes always got screwed.
Yeah. And I think for me, one of the really key points about understanding particularly the intersection of Indigenous experiences and sexual violence or sexual assault is, and we have one of the women, Sarah Deer, who's Muskogee Creek, and she's a lawyer and an academic who's been working on this for a long time, talks about who's perpetrating the violence. Yeah. So in most situations of domestic or sexual violence, it is intra-racial. So white on white, black on black, Latino on Latina. But with Native women being the exception, where the majority of perpetrators are interracial, mostly white men abusing, assaulting, violating Native women. And so that's a really important point to understand, kind of this epidemic of violence that the Native women are experiencing. And then a big chunk of this documentary becomes about the fact that, save for one tribal nation, they are prevented from criminally prosecuting non-Indians.
Through an act that was in the 1800s that can easily be overturned by Congress,
Yes.
And all that kind of stuff. We learned also the phrase man camp, which is evidently as we're running pipelines and such things throughout
oil fields
throughout the Midwest. Evidently, a lot of workers are put up in modular homes. And at least outside of this particular reservation, one of the camps holds 600 sexual offenders. So that's particularly exciting. If you are somebody who likes to feel safe, that's got to feel great.
Yeah. And that's the point of like these systems, right? Like that are all interworking to create this space for the abuse, right? So then you've got the capitalistic ventures to develop this land and this oil and pipelines or whatever. You bring in mostly men, you put them in these rural areas, and then
there's cheap access to drugs and alcohol.
There's the systems of drug dealers and alcohol. And one of the phrases was these groups of men then feel entitled to money and women, similarly to how the gold rush operated, which was kind of a perspective I hadn't clicked with me. And I was like, oh, okay, I understand now what these camps are like. They're like gold rush camps. In spoiler alert, which is also when there was a lot of violation of Native and Indigenous communities and women. So making that connection, I think for me was really key to understanding how this is like contemporary colonizing.
Yeah. And so as women ourselves, like whenever we watch these kind of things, we are constantly reminded that one of our intersections of privilege is that when we're not in an oppressed community, we need to be particularly vocal about the sisterhood, which is a phrase I absolutely abhor, but I think they wanted to invoke it in this way, in a certain way. The other reason that I would say to watch this particular documentary is that it's one of the best I think I've seen at demonstrating the myriad of ways that women respond to sexual assault.
Yeah.
And how we all work out our healing in different ways. And that for some people, it is an accelerated timeline. For other people, it is a quite retarded timeline in how you interact with your own healing and what agency you want to have in it and kind of things like that. And so if nothing else, if you are somebody who has ever thought, wow, why didn't they go to the police?
Yeah.
I would love for you, and this is not meant to be a judgmental way, because I think every single person on the planet, until you intersect with this thing, asks that question. My parents asked that question until I sat them down and kind of explained to them why they wouldn't. And now they're like, oh, women should never go to the police. So not really. But if you could just hold an hour of your life to realizing that for these particular women, police were not necessarily an option. But even if they were, I don't think many of them would have gone. They talk about multiple assaults. They talk about a culture of violence. They talk about a lot of much more complicated things than reporting an assault. And then if this is the first time you're joining us, after you watch this, if you then could go watch the show Unbelievable, I think that will be a really good, it's going to be 9 hours of sitting with someone else's pain, but it'll really explain why even in American territory, this is a complicated issue. And so what can we do to remove the extra barriers for Native women should be the question we're asking. And that'll be a really good, I gotta do something after I watch these kind of things.
A starting point, I think, because, yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter with a lot of these women, and certainly most Native women, is that they literally can't call the police because the tribal law enforcement has no jurisdiction. And as one of the participants in the documentary said, the federal system are the responders and they don't respond. And there's a whole lot of layers of history of the United States government relationship with sovereign nations. And there's some fascinating explorations of what sovereignty means and how that intersects with ending this culture of rape and violence. So I think, this is something we both spend a lot of time sitting with in different ways. And you have a lot more experience with domestic violence than I do, but we both care a lot about Indigenous issues and spend a lot of time thinking about it. But I still learned a lot from the way that this documentary was filmed.
Oh, for sure.
And the way that they talked about specifically the relationship of violence and bodies, and the way we perceive Native women. It's a real simple argument to make, but so important, and one that I hadn't even come across in terms of just understanding that the way we view them as a society has part of creating this system that allows for abuse, because we don't see them as equal citizens or as equal women deserving of dignity and sovereignty. So yeah, that was kind of rambling at the end there, but I think even that connection was really important. And the list on the website will show you all the other places you can find watching this and all the other film festivals. So if you missed it for this one, find it somewhere else.
For sure. Absolutely. And when we come back and join you again, it'll be our final film, which is one that PBS's Independent Lens was either responsible for, or at least is distributing. So it's going to be A, horrifically depressing, and B, very well produced.
Very well done.
And it is both of those things. So we'll see you for that. Bye.
Bye.